Good evening and welcome to Our Town Live. With us tonight is candidate for re-election, Andrew Deloria. Welcome, Andrew.
Hi, thanks, Sandra.
Thank you for joining us. And why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself, please?
So I am a current incumbent on the select board. I'm the very proud father of two Billerica school children, one in elementary school, one in the middle school, and married to my wonderful wife, Maggie, for these many years. And she's highly tolerant of all the different demands that being a local elected official has. So we live in North Billerica, and we think it's great, and we really incredibly proud of the service I've been able to provide the town over my years. And there's a great many things to be proud of. There's much more work to be done. And that's why, and I actually do enjoy the job, even in the hard meetings and the hard days. It's still a job I enjoy. I enjoy public service. I look forward to doing it for another 3 years.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about your success stories?
Well, I think I can point to a great many of them. And first and foremost, I think that we as a town are a much more transparent and methodical organization than we used to be when I first joined the board. There's much more understanding from the greater public in terms of what things are on the agenda and when they're going to be discussed. And it's not just what you do, it's how you accomplish them are equally important. If you can't be watched on television, if people don't know on social media when things are on the agenda, if you constantly looking to do things when it's people can't observe it, it lends a distrust, and unfortunately, government is in a sort of ebb tide of trust right now. So, and especially at the local government level, where there's so many impacts to your everyday life, we need to make sure that people have confidence in that decision-making process. They see it, they can observe it, they can comment on it. So, I'm proud of the way we've done things for the most part, in terms of making sure we have a transparent and easily accessible board, especially when we've had sort of a pro-transparency sort of majority on the board. I think in terms of actual deeds and accomplishments, I think we've delivered on promises that were made in the past and not delivered on. We've delivered 2 new schools, Parker School and obviously the high school, which are shining testaments to our investment in education. We've also put a lot of things on the ground and under the ground in terms of sewer and sidewalks and street improvements, and actually just fundamentally accepting more streets as public ways. And so we take care of them the way they should be. That's delivering on these promises that were made for many more years than I was in town or maybe even been alive, and we've sort of delivered on them. So we haven't asked people to wait in vain. We've delivered on the process because we've proactively done better budgeting, better strategy to make sure we actually can do the things we promised and not just sort of print things on sort of campaign literature and send it out and not deliver. We're actually delivering it, digging holes, building roads. Sometimes that comes with traffic, and I get that. But nonetheless, I think it's good that we're delivering on those things that were promised in the past. So those are the things I'm quite proud of off the top of my head.
What are some of the things that need, I'm not going to call them failures, but need more work?
Well, I think there's 2 sides of a coin that people really point to when they voice some frustration. I think from an economic development standpoint, the town's been very successful in corporate clients moving into town, big companies that move in and hire and do great things in town. We're desperately proud of each and every one of them. However, most people don't really think of that as economic development. They think of stores and retail and restaurants and that kind of thing. That's a particular sector that Billerica consistently still needs to do more development on. We've introduced new tools to try to address that issue. We are in a very competitive economic development area in terms of we have Lowell to our north and we have Burlington to our south for that retail restaurant mix that people want so much. So Billerica is needing to adapt to make sure we can attract those types of entities into town and make sure we can be competitive with our neighbors to the south and to the north. I think we're continuing to do that. It's not an overnight process, and we continue to work on it each and every day. I think that's something people are very focused on and want to continue to do. I also think we need to continue to make sure we're maintaining Billerica as an affordable place to live. Because of the success stories that I mentioned previously, Billerica has become sort of a hot town from a real estate perspective. I'm sure you've seen driving around town, lines of people around for every open house. And the housing prices are not going lower, they're only going higher and sort of astronomical in some cases. I think Billerica's strength is an economically diverse mix of people and professions and obviously cultures and what have you. That's what makes Billerica strong. We don't want to lose that by making Billerica completely inaccessible from a price standpoint. So that involves introducing a greater housing mix into what we have. So We want to make sure those are sort of pressing issues that we have in town. Amongst really the first and foremost thing that I think we need to get through first is the COVID epidemics. While I'm talking to you from my house instead of at BATV, we need to get surmount this first. We're still an enormous challenge. I think the town has outpaced other communities in terms of its preparation and vaccination schedule. I do wish the governor had trusted municipalities to do this, because Billerica is a case study in how to do it well. So those things, I think first and foremost, we need to get through the pandemic first and see what's on the other side. We're fortunate that Billerica has remained economically strong and sort of viable through this community. Other communities haven't been as lucky or as prepared. We have been prepared, so I'm excited to see what we see on the other side, but we do need to get through this first mix, because still a lot of folks who are at risk and need to continue to be protected.
Well, you've touched on a couple of different things, but I want to go back to housing for a moment.
Sure.
Does Billerica have a moral and ethical responsibility to help resolve the housing crisis?
So there are roughly, I want to say roughly 5,000, over 5,000, close to 6,000 people who are looking for housing in Billerica. Roughly just about around 1,000, over 1,000 of those are senior folks, and 4,500 of them are families. And there's several hundred veterans and who are also an at-risk population for housing. All these folks are housing unstable. Well, I just touched on the sort of the incredible economic environment for housing. There's such competition for housing in town. You're seeing, as we are, the average housing price in Billerica is creeping north, creeping closer and closer to over that $500,000 mark. That doesn't make it easy for anyone to afford a home, especially people who are in economic crisis. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll ever be able to build enough housing correctly to house all those folks who are, housing unstable. I wish we could, honestly, because housing is a human right. But in terms of like what the town needs to do is better position ourselves to make sure we can hopefully accommodate some of those folks into maybe town-derived strategies for affordable housing, or making sure when we do see new developments in town that they do allow for some increasing affordable housing components, so we get some of those folks housed, as it were. The new mall development project, the planning board made sure that that was part of that development. So I was pleased to see that. But unfortunately, they'll probably need more, and I'm almost certain that there'll always be a need for housing going forward. So sort of answering your question, I do think we need to do things we need to do. I do think there's a town solution from some of this, that the town could develop its own housing to some degree to help service some of these folks in town. But we also need to make sure we can dovetail perhaps our economic development strategies with allowing for increased availability of affordable housing.
Do you see the state increasing from 10% to say 15%?
No, I don't have my estimate is with the new housing reforms they just passed. I think that's sort of they're going to check their box that they've done enough for now. I think 15% is in all likelihood something that the state will have to approach at some point, probably in the near term. But right now, I don't expect another elevation from that. I think the choices they've made are positive for the vast majority of the Commonwealth when appropriately instituted at the local level. But I don't know if teams around the corner.
Okay. Something they did just do at the state was talk about early voting, mail-in voting. Why don't we talk about that for a few minutes, if that's okay?
Yes, I think more voting is good. That's just first and foremost, and making sure people are comfortable to vote is also good. Unfortunately, we have it in the United States, not so much in Billerica, but in the United States, there's been places where it hasn't been always comfortable to vote without a pandemic. Making sure people have the ability, they can comfortably and safely and easily cast their ballot is incredibly valuable. I'm really grateful to the state and the governor for signing this extension of the COVID parameters, as it were, to allow for more mail-in voting. I think it's something people should take advantage of if they don't feel comfortable voting in person, or they have something coming up, like or if they just feel it's a better choice for them. Please, by all means, take advantage of it, and make sure that your friends and neighbors know they have that option to go forward. If you want to vote in person, that's great, and if you can do it safely, fantastic. That's always going to be an option there. But for those folks who have a complicated ability to get to the polls, that option is a great thing to do. So you can take advantage of that. The town doesn't have the ballots in-house yet, I know that, but you can order your ballot online. That's right on the front page of the Billerica town page. There's a button. You can order your ballot right there. So when they do come in, they'll be sent right out to you.
Okay. What is the time frame to get those ballots back? Do they have to be back the day of, the day before? How do they do this?
I believe, I'm probably going to be wrong, but I believe it's like roughly the weekday before. So it'd be the Friday at noon, I think, right around then. I encourage people, if you've made your decision, do not dilly-dally. Get you can put it in the mail or the green box right outside town hall. That's also a safe receptacle for your ballot. You can do that as well, by all means. But do take the time to make sure you're making an informed choice going forward. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. Just in case people aren't quite aware, when do they vote? If they're voting in person, when do they vote?
So if you're voting in person, or if you want to get your ballot ahead of that schedule, it's April 10th. There are multiple offices on the ballot in terms of your town meeting, your planning board, your school committee, and of course the board of the select board, which is what I'm running for.
Okay. Let's talk about water rates.
Hey, why not?
Why not? Water rates do increase.
They do.
They do. Prices go up. Very rarely do they go down. Infrastructure costs go up. Water rates do rise. Are we raising them too much, too fast?
So for a very long time prior to my being on the, they weren't touched at all. But also we weren't building a lot of sewer. We weren't building a lot of water infrastructure. We weren't really being fiscally responsible with our wastewater and water systems. We needed to upgrade them. We need to expand them. We need to deliver on that promise that people needed to do that. Now, because I always, maybe this says more about me than I like to say, I always have my town budget book handy. I have it happen right here. But so on page 46, you see, this is probably not gonna be looking, but you can look it up online. You can see the red bar is what we charge, and the blue bar is what it costs. And you can see water rates are roughly the same. It's a one-to-one. And you see a little bit of disproportion on the sewer side because we're doing so much more sewer expansion. Much more of the debt is being paid with sewer fees for all that we're taking on to expand sewer than on the water side, which that infrastructure is a little bit further along. So you can see, I think we are charging an appropriate amount because it sort of costs what it takes. There isn't a lot of surprises. 46 and 47 are great pages to look at. We've done a huge amount of investment. As you said, those things cost money, but leaving that expansion aside, also the raw materials to make water, which is kind of a weird sentence, but nonetheless, the raw materials make sure our water is safe. We draw it from obviously the river. It has to be appropriately taken care of, and then it's delivered to your homes. That all those costs do in fact rise. We obviously have experts on our personnel and our water and sewer departments that make sure that those pipes and things stay healthy and correct. You may or may not know we have a massive sewer infrastructure challenge around the Pond Street area that we're going to have to invest $300,000 to $500,000 in doing that. That's not going to result in higher taxes. That's going to result because we have the funds through that strategy that we've developed with the enterprise fund to pay for that. So it doesn't hit the tax rate. So overall, I mean, some folks would like lower water fees, and they say, well, you could just pass on the real estate taxes. So you're still paying the same amount. But in one way, I just prefer to pay for what I use. So in fact, that instead of putting it on the tax rate, you're sort of like, oh, I use this much water, I use this much sewer, I pay for this much sewer. Mm-hmm. I think that's an appropriate way to go versus, well, it's going on a tax rate, so everyone pays the same for everything. I just feel like as much as possible, people should pay for what they use. I just think it's fairer.
Okay, well, we've talked about water, we've talked about housing. There's been discussions about we're going to have a water ban, we're going to have a drought because of all this new building. Do you want to address that a little bit?
So our water permit, so the town can't just take whatever it can. We're permitted a certain amount of gallons per for the town by the state, and the state really administers. So when you get these water bans, which we have every single year, whether it's hot or if it's not, that's just prescribed by the DEP. And it doesn't really matter in terms of, it doesn't really affect, we have plenty of water to do that, and more or less it's just trying to keep our that strategy near to what the state has prescribed us to do that. So you're always going to see water bans regardless. We've had them in the past, we'll have them in the future, because that's what we're required to do by the state. It's not something we elect to do, it's something the state compels us to do. So I don't think that new building strategy is it's going to result in a more water ban strategy. We're going to run out of water. Obviously, we always want to use water responsibly and be observant of those water bans and such like that. But that's not a key. That's not a key aspect. Our permit would obviously change if it needed to through the state. It's just really about water responsibility is what the state is asking us to do.
Okay, thank you. Why are you the better candidate?
Well, I think what I bring to the select board, and what I'm proud of, it is a precise professionalism that is always sort of focused on delivering what we do. I'm not sort of there to cut ribbons and pontificate about my latest far-fetched idea. I like getting things done. I like that the Parker School is done. I like the high school is about to be done. I like the amount of that we've put in hundreds and hundreds of yards of sewer, because that's something we got done. More miles of sidewalks, more miles of roads. I like getting things done. I like the Pegahana-Rizza project, but that's something we can deliver for the community, so we can be, so the community have a better community feel, like projects like that. We have a better parks and trees department and recreation department because we invest and reorganize it, so we can deliver a better product to the town. Those are things I like. And if you look at at the overall tax rate, we've left more and more money with the taxpayer. We don't take the full amount that the state allows us to take from Billerica. We want to do that. We've been able to expand services while not maximizing the amount of tax burden to the individual residents. That's something that Billerica used to do historically, and yet not deliver additional services. We've sort of taken the inverse point. We were able to expand services, expand the quality of the community that we're sort of stewards of, and make sure we keep that tax on that tax point relatively affordable, or hopefully very affordable for many folks in town, because we leave a lot of money where it belongs, in people's pockets. So I think I've been a proper steward of the tax dollar. I've been a proper steward of advocating for greater and more quality services. And I also just don't keep my head down, just sort of celebrating the past. I always want to look to Billerica's future. There's going to be a point where none of us are here. We want to make sure the town is as quality then, or if not better, than where we found it. So we were trying to set things up for the success, and many things we're putting into place we'll never actually get to see, but there have been better investments.
Thank you. You have been vocal about a couple of different things. Let's touch on a couple of them. The Pegahana-Rizza complex. You were very vocal at one of the recent meetings about having to spend more to get the same product. You have been vocal about the state not giving the town enough leeway to do its job with the vaccination. Talk to us a little bit about those two and why you become so passionate at some of these meetings.
So there are things like mistakes happen in life, and we're all tolerant of people making mistakes. What I don't have any toleration for is unforced errors. I don't like where we didn't have to make a mistake and we actually made a mistake. So the Pegahana-Rizza project, we had it back in the fall. We could have had the opportunity to move that project along. My colleagues decided to remove it from the ballot, from the warrant, and remove it from consideration from the CPC committee. Ultimately, given that delay, it's going to cost that project an additional $600,000 of taxpayer money to complete what I think is a very, very quality project. $600,000 can be used in a lot of different ways. It didn't need to be used. I feel like that was an unforced error, and that really aggravated me, because it's a quality project that everyone thinks is great, but they didn't act in the way to do it successfully, and it's ultimately costing the town. And so it's a huge missed opportunity. So I get agitated about that when we have a quality project and we can't get out of our own way. In the same way, the state, in terms of the vaccine program, has been concentrating on these large vaccination centers that really, in theory, I guess could be positive in terms of like at Gillette or Fenway or elsewhere. But as you know, as folks, you know, Gillette is a massive complex, and to drive to Billerica, for drive from Billerica to Gillette, to traverse the massive wasteland of parking lots right now, for folks who are older and may never have been there, or maybe don't go in there on a regular basis, and then have to get in the right line and wait a number of hours to get their injection. That's a lot to ask of folks who are at health and age risk from this very, very challenging pandemic. I just thought the state should just give the vaccine to the municipalities, especially towns with like Billerica, who have the staff, who have a full paramedic corps, who can rely on other resources like Shawshene Tech and other folks in town. Like we had our great public nurse program here in town that's done a phenomenal job. We had the staff, we had to do it. We did it successfully for hundreds and hundreds of doses. Why not just give it the rest so people could get vaccinated and at home in their hometown, in a place they feel comfortable, they know how to get to, and they know how to get home from. It just seemed like an unforced error that whereas communities that have proof positive that we could do it better, we weren't given that opportunity just to support what was originally decided on as what the governor was going to do. So that's been frustrating. Those are two things I think we could have done better if we had just gotten out of our own way.
Thank you. After the discussion on the Peggy Hannah Rizzo complex, there were a lot of social media posting. Why do we need another sports complex? What do we do for people who aren't interested in sports? Tell me what's around in Billerica and how you've helped that along.
So I think well, first and foremost, I really encourage people to look at the renderings of the Peggy Hannah Rizzo complex that's coming up. There are sports facilities for redoing what's already there, but also adding a huge amount of outdoor space for a number of different types of activities. So it's not another sports arena that has sports that are already there, but we're actually introducing new and more better uses there at that particular facility. But we have a number of different outdoor facilities in Billerica that have been so important during our pandemic times in terms of people just gotta get out of their house. We want to make sure, but not all of them are as accessible in terms of folks who are have different abilities. The Peggy Hannah Rizzo project will add more sort of accessible areas for folks who can get back into nature and maybe access them. But we also have a lot of different areas that need that sort of attention. We also have indoor areas that need our attention as well, like the senior center. The senior center is sort of not, I want to say bursting at the seams, but in terms of the talent that's contained in that building, in terms of what they're delivering, that building is losing its utility in terms of the ability to contain all the different programs. So we do have an eye to future on other projects like that from indoor spaces for folks who have different abilities or not outdoorsy. But we also, we have a keen eye into that future. And unfortunately, it took us a long time, but we finally got the sort of capital committee off the ground to look to those types of projects. But I do think the PHR, Peggy Hannah Rizzo complex, amongst other outdoor facilities, do service a great many folks in town. And I think it's not just sports, but like folks who want to get outside and enjoy and really participate as a community. And I think we're beginning to do that more effectively than what we've done in the past.
Okay, we're going to wrap things up soon.
Cool.
Why don't you tell me a little bit about why I should vote for you?
So I think folks should vote for me, Andrew and Delorier, because you want a quality process and a quality product, and that's what I've been focused on delivering for Billerica every day of my service. If you want professionalism and transparency in your representation, if you want someone you can count on that represents every segment of Billerica, that is excited for every person who's been here for generations, but also equally excited for folks who just got here yesterday. I think with someone who also wants to remember where Billerica, remember the Billerica's past is something we build on, and something we can celebrate in our future. I think those are two things that I bring forward to every single decision I make. I use someone who has an understandable framework for how they make decisions. I think I bring this sort of a people use predictability as a negative, but there's a predictable sense. The loudest voice in the room isn't always the one you listen to. You need to listen to a consensus amount of voices from all across Billerica because they all need equal representation. So I've tried to do that successfully in every different part of town, in every different population. And that consistency on how I approach problems, I think gives a lot of people comfort, and something you can take comfort in, that you'll know where the decisions are making, and you know it's trying to be made for the best choice for Billerica.
If I know nothing about you, how do I find out more information?
So through the evils of social media, Facebook is a great option to do that. We have a fairly robust Facebook page where you can access all our different websites and such like that. It's just a one-stop shop, as it were. So you can learn more, find out more about my background, find out more about my decision making. And of course, you can look to the town website in terms of our meeting minutes if you want to read up more about decisions recent and in past that I've been a part of. So that's, I would say, the fastest way to find out more.
Okay, great. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you want people to know about you as of right now?
Well, actually, I'll make a pitch for not me. So if in the key part of Billerica's town government is town meeting, and we have a number of different 30 plus seats that no one pulled papers for to run for. If you're watching tonight and you have 15 friends, which I guarantee you do have 15 friends, and they're in your precinct, you have 15 neighbors, everyone's got 15 neighbors. Think about representing your community, your town, and your family at town meeting. I would love to hear your voice added to those. So if you just have someone, when you get your ballot or you're at the ballot booth, just have them write in your name to be elected at town meeting. It's an incredibly rewarding service you can make for your community and your neighbors. So I do encourage everyone watching to think that about. It's how I started my service. I do enjoy being part of town meeting. It's how our town works, and it's an incredibly vital part. Because if it's not your voice, you may not always agree with the voice that chooses to represent you. So it's something that you should get out there and think about, because things like the Peggy Rizzo complex, things like fire trucks, things like the salaries that we pay folks are decided at town meeting. It's not the select board that does those, it's town meeting that does those. So it's an incredibly important office. So I do encourage your audience to think about talking to their friends and taking out their little Sharpie there and writing their name.
So we can have people come talk to you to find out more about write-in ballots, because it's very important that they write the name legibly in exactly the way it would appear if they were on the ballot, so they can come talk to you about a sticker campaign if they need more information.
Sure, why not? There's a really good link about town meeting too. Yeah, you do not want me writing your name because I have horrible handwriting. I'm lucky to be elected every year. If I was writing myself in. So I do encourage people to look at that, but I really encourage people to get involved. There's some bright lights on the horizon. This has been a difficult time in Billerica and the world. I think there's some things to look forward. I just saw obviously some crocuses and some daffodils starting to sprout up. There's some good news around the corner. Be excited, but take the time to vote on April 10th, if not before, to have your voice heard and have a confident voice heard for a more positive Billerica going forward. It's my honor to represent you, and I do ask for your vote on April 10th.